Welcome to June, and you know what that means? Let's talk about all of the books that I read in May. I had a not so good reading month, and we'll dive into it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be going over all the books that I read in May, which unfortunately wasn't a spectacular reading month, but I had some good books that I really enjoyed out of the month and some not so much. So before we get into it, always make sure that you like and subscribe. Check the description box below for all of my links, my Bookish Box ambassador link, my Patreon account, Pango Books, and all my socials are down below, including all of the books that I talk about in this video. There will be Amazon affiliate links in the description box, so if you want to pick up any of these books, head on over there, click the link below. You will be getting straight to the book and you'll be helping the author and me out. So let's get into all of the books that I read in May. The first book that I do want to talk about is 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. You guys, this book shattered me in 1,000 good ways. It is sad, but it is profound. I loved every minute of this book. I did give it 5 stars. I didn't know what to expect going into this book. I thought that, yeah, it may make me sad. Boy, did I not expect what happened in this book. And I don't want to give it away to you guys, but we follow our girl Poppy, and whenever she is really young, a family moves in next door, and they are from Norway, and she befriends the boy Rune, and they become best friends, and then they end up falling in love whenever they become teenagers, and all of a sudden he has to move back to Norway. His father's company has said, you need to move back to Norway, we need you there. And so of course he is like outright furious. I think they're like 15 at the time. He moves back to Norway, has a troubled time. They talk over like Skype and things like that. And then she stops responding to him altogether. And then fast forward 2 years, they move back to the States into the same house, and things are not what Rune thought they were, and the love story between them, the obstacles they go through, the depth of emotion that is put into this book was wild. I got to the ending and I was sobbing, like uncontrollably. I couldn't stop. I read the epilogue. I cried even harder. This book brought out so many emotions in me. I highly suggest checking the trigger warnings before you go into this, because I don't think this book is for everybody, but it was so amazing. The next book that I ended up reading was Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I, again, didn't know what to expect going into this book. I figured it was going to give me those gothic vibes, kind of eerie vibes, spooky vibes, if anything. And to be honest with you, like, this book wasn't at all what I would have imagined it to be. And I don't want to give away spoilers, because if you plan on reading this, if I tell you anything that I want to tell you, it would give away the shock factor. It would give away a lot of things. But just know that there is a house and everybody wants to know what's going on in the house. Our girl ends up becoming a maid to work in the house and starts finding things out. There's a mystery. There's a boy involved. I mean, just so many things. I gave this 3 stars. There really isn't a whole lot of romance in here. There is, but that's not like the big focal point. The focal point is the house, the eerie vibes, the mystery, the thrilling aspect of it. 3 stars isn't a bad rating. It's just not my cup of tea. It's not my type of book, but I had a really, really good time reading this. So if you really like thriller, mystery with gothic vibes and a little bit of romance in there, I highly suggest checking this out. And also, if you want to make it more atmospheric, maybe read it during spooky season. Next up, we have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nallen. I was just a glutton for punishment this month. I was like, let's just read all of the sad books. This story is kind of similar setting up with A Thousand Boy Kisses, but it's quite different. So you have a guy and a girl who live next to each other, and they are like best friends growing up. Once they hit high school, they run around with a different group of friends, and she's like in the popular group and he's like in the popular group, but they're not together like group friend wise. He hangs around some group of friends that are bullies in a sense, and she kind of stays to herself. She really doesn't have a whole group of friends like he does. And there are things that happen in this book. They come together, they fall apart. There is bullying, there is a sad story in here, there is love, there is so many things. I cried at the end of this, definitely not as hard as I did with A Thousand Boy Kisses, but I cried nonetheless. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I enjoyed it for what it was. I will not read it again because I feel like the shock factor's gone for me. I know what happens, I know the story to it, but I am happy that I read it nonetheless. Check trigger warnings as well, because there are some things in here that are not for the faint of heart, if you will, so definitely check those out. But I enjoyed it. And segueing into our next book, it is If Only I Had Told Her by Laura Nallin. This is the second and final book in that duology, and I gave this 2 stars. I don't feel like this book needed to happen. I feel like the way that If He Had Been With Me ended, I feel like it could have just been a standalone. I don't really think that we needed a book that expanded past the events that happened at the end of the first book. I feel like it was just kind of a filler. It just really drew a lot of things out. I feel like we could have wrapped all of this up in just an extended epilogue at the end of the first book. We didn't need 300 pages of this. I mean, it's definitely worth it because it brings the story full circle and you kind of know what happens after those events. But if you don't really want to continue on, if you feel like book 1 ended in a relatively good place, you don't need to read this. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like this book did not need to happen. Next up, we went from one extreme to another. So I read Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. You guys, I gave this 3 stars. This book is dark. Check trigger warnings, especially for any of the books that I recommend. But this book in particular, there are some things that happen. This is not necessarily a stalker romance, but it's like a very hate to love type of romance, and they are stranded on an island. Our girl does some mischievous things, we'll just say. She ends up going to this island with this guy. Then all of a sudden there is this like caretaker of this lighthouse there. Creepy things going on. By the end of the story, what you thought was gonna happen is entirely different. Please check trigger warnings, but I gave it 3 stars. I feel like it was good, but I feel like the story was way too drawn out, and I feel like H.D. Carlton has wrote much better books, I feel. So if you are an H.D. Carlton fan, definitely check this out. I feel like you will love it. But if you have read basically all of her books at this point, I feel like this one rates the lowest, or at least towards the bottom. I then continued my read Emmy and the Tudor Queen, which is book 2 in the Hearts and Crowns trilogy by Natalie Murray. I love this story, you guys. I absolutely love it. These little books are YA, so there's really not any spice in here, but there is romance. If you love Tudor England and you like a alternate history where what if Queen Elizabeth had a son, what if he became king, things like that, and it has like time travel. There's a lot of things that happen in here, and I really enjoyed it. I really love that time period anyway. I love the historical aspect. I like how Natalie Murray took real history and wove it in to this story, or if it was real history, she kind of alternated it to make it an alternate history here. I loved it. You follow Emmy, who gets a ring, ends up going to sleep, and ends up in 1580 Tudor England. There's King Nicholas the Ironheart that is there, and she's trying to prevent things from happening. Things don't go the way Emmy thinks they're gonna go. I gave this book 4 stars. I can't wait to read the 3rd book in this series and then go on to the omnibus that is upgraded to be more new adult with a lot of spicy fancier scenes, so I want to see how things are different. If you really want a YA time travel fantasy romance that is set in alternate Tudor England, check out this series. And sadly, my first DNF of the month, and that is This Woven Kingdom by Tahara Mafi. I went into this wanting to love it because I have heard a lot of people really enjoy this trilogy. However, I did not. I got maybe 40% of the way through it. I didn't care at that point. I was not connected to the characters. I wasn't connected to the story. I don't feel like the story was very gripping. I don't feel like what we were alluding to that was going to be happening was worth reading about. The characters felt one-dimensional. I don't know. This series fell so flat for me, and I am so sad about it because I really wanted to love it because it's about Persian mythology. It's about like a kingdom and a girl that's going to try to save the kingdom and just all of these things, like everything that you would love about a fantasy romance, but it just fell flat for me and I feel so bad about that. If you definitely want to give it a try, I highly suggest that there are a lot of people that do love this trilogy. Just wasn't one for me. I finally got to one of the books that my husband bought me, which is Paper Princess by Erin Watt. I really enjoyed this. This is a bully contemporary romance where our girl, she lives poor. She ends up being told that her guardianship is by this guy. His last name is Royal, and he has how many sons? He has 5 sons, and she is going to live with them in this big mansion. She's like the new royal, has to end up going to their elite school and being in that group, and there's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of things that happen. I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to continue this series. I don't know what it was. I ate it up. I don't know if it's because I was coming off a DNF. I don't know if it was just different than what I had been reading all month and maybe it just hit me a little bit more, but I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I can't wait to continue this. So if you like bully contemporary romances that are in like a high school setting, there are some triggers in here. Go in knowing that it is a dark book. Don't let the pretty, cover fool you because it is dark. I found myself being like, whoa, I cannot believe how dark this book actually was. But again, if you like the bully romances and the high school setting, definitely check this out. So I'm going to talk about the next 2 books as a whole because I ended up DNFing the first book and I didn't even try the second book only because I was too scared. I'm not going to lie. I was frightened out of my mind, and that is The Caro Haunt by Darcy Coates, and then the other book was The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. These books terrified me. Well, at least The Caro Haunt did. Absolutely terrified me. These are horror books. They are definitely not for the faint of heart. If you love horror, I think you would really enjoy these books. I was just too freaked out. So I DNF'd them. So then I was like, let's do a little bit of a light-hearted read coming off of that horror. And I ended up reading Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I love this little story. It's a middle grade story. I can see why people absolutely love this series. I'm probably not going to continue on. I feel like I am way past the age that this would really, hit for me. But for nostalgic vibes, I think a lot of people really enjoy this series, or at least, they are passing it on to their children and their children are really enjoying it. It was a very fast read. I can definitely see why people say there's a lot of Howl in Rhysand and other fantasy romance book boyfriends. I can see the correlation that everyone's getting. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It is what it is. I had a good time. Probably will never read it again, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. The next book is not going to be for everybody, but for all my non-fiction readers out there, Little Book of Aliens by Adam Frank was a delight to read. This is a non-fiction book about physics, about astronomy, about the search for alien life and kind of where we are scientific-wise, what we have found, what they do. So it just dissects so many things. I gave this book 4 stars because I love aliens and I love physics and I love astronomy. So if you like those things and you like non-fiction, I highly suggest picking picking up the little book of aliens. But if you're not really into aliens or astronomy, cosmology, or even nonfiction, I don't think this is going to be a book for you. I am so sad to say that I gave 2 stars to The Last Luminian by S.G. Blaze, and I'm definitely not going to be continuing on. This is like a sci-fi adventure type of book. There really isn't any romance in here, at least for book 1. Basically, the galaxy is in a war, and our girl is trying to figure out how she fits into all of this. I don't know. I don't feel like it hit very well. I feel like the writing was written way too young for me. So I wasn't connecting at all. But if you love sci-fi and you love that the galaxy is in like all of these wars and you have these different races and some of the races are extinct, or at least people think they're extinct, you would definitely enjoy this. I am so sad that I didn't like it. And then I finished up my buddy read of The Fangs of War by E.J. Doble. I read this with Vanessa, one of my subscribers and Patreon members. We read it throughout the whole month of May. We would read just sections of it each week and talk about it. I'm confused. I'm going to be very honest with you. I gave this book, I think 3 stars because the ending I feel was a little bit better than the beginning. And I don't know if that's because I finally understood somewhat of what was going on. Starting out, I mean, you have so many different POVs. I want to say 4 or 5 different POVs, and you just start hitting the ground running. You have no backstory. You have no idea why these different territories are warring against each other. You don't understand why the governor doesn't like certain people or why other people are betraying other people. You don't understand what's going on. Like, I don't know. Me and Vanessa, I want to say, like, by the time we got to chapter 36 or 40, we were like, okay, we like, this POV, or we like this storyline, but we were still confused about a lot of things that were going on. I don't know if it was the writing. I don't know if it's just not the type of epic fantasy that I enjoy. I don't know. I mean, it's a beautiful copy. Don't get me wrong. This came from Page and Wick, but I didn't connect with it. So 3 stars. The next one that I picked up was just a nice little romance, and that is Just My Type by Fallon Ballard. This book is just a contemporary workplace romance. Nothing spectacular about the book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It's okay. It wasn't outstanding. It wasn't something that I'm going to be thinking about for days on end, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. And our girl, she works at a newspaper. She works at one of those, okay? She is a writer. She's like in kind of like the love and romance type of section. She wants to get out of it. All of a sudden, they are merging with another company, and one of the guys that comes in is her ex. Like the ex, the one that broke her heart and she never could come back from it. So they have this little game where they outline certain things and they are supposed to be posting them each week, and whoever ends up getting the most likes or the most people to vote for them, they end up earning the spot at being a columnist to be able to do whatever they want instead of just writing in a specific section of the newspaper. They're at odds with each other. They're warring together. Her friends that work with them, they're kind of caught up in this. I found myself laughing a lot. There was a lot of modern, references like to books or movies that was in here. But again, like I said, it was what it was. It's a very short romance that, will make you laugh and you will enjoy it, but I don't think it's a long-lasting book that's going to make you think about it. The next one that we have is Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. I gave this 4 stars. This is a mafia romance, and I haven't really read a whole lot of mafia romances, so I don't know how to compare this to different writers and different storylines. So I'm just gonna go with what I know. Basically, you have, what are they? The Griffins and the Gallows. They are warring families in the mafia, and they are in Chicago. I have to remind myself because I kind of got a little confused for a little while on this book, but it really wrapped up just fine. It's a very short, like 260 page book. Not really a whole lot going on. It's a very straightforward, to the point. But basically, our girl comes from the Gallows family. She comes from the Gallows family, and she and her brothers end up going to the Griffin's party. I think one of the kids is having like a birthday party or something. They end up going. She sneaks into the Griffin's household. She wants to look around, see how they live. She ends up in the library. All of a sudden, she's about to get caught, so she kind of ducks down because she was holding a watch, and she doesn't know how to get out of there because you have Callum Griffin, who is just sitting in the library by the fire, going on and on about reading whatever journal he is or whatnot, so she doesn't know how she's gonna escape. She ends up making a fire happen, so she's able to escape. Callum Griffin sees kind of the back of the head and stuff, thinks that it's one of the brothers. So whenever they meet up later on, they are kind of fighting. One of the brothers gets messed up. She comes forward and says it was me, tosses it into the water, and we go from there. All of a sudden, now they are caught up in this arranged marriage because the two heads of the families have said, we're gonna marry you both, and you know, we're gonna come together and it's gonna make a peace, and they do not want that at all. I really enjoyed this. The cover, I didn't understand the cover until after I read it, and I was like, okay, I understand now the symbolism to this cover. So I want to pick up the rest of the series, and I want to continue these books. The last book that I ended up reading in May was Knights of the Goddess, or Knight of the Goddess by Briar Bolin. This is the fourth and final book in the Blood of a Fae series. I loved this. It took me all month to read it because I didn't want it to end. I loved the characters. I loved the world. I loved how it's an Arthurian reimagining. I love the Fae in this world. I love how it started out as a Arthurian reimagining type of world, and by the time you get to this book, it is so much more, like so much more. And I went into this book being like, how is Briar going to wrap this up? How is she going to make all these ends meet and stuff? I was on a ride, okay? I got to like 60 or 70%. Things were happening. I started crying, and then all the revelations came out, and it was just trying to read as fast as I could to get to the end. I was like, I need to know what happens. I need to know how this ends. So good. I can't tell you anything about this book because it would give spoilers away. But if you do like a fae fantasy romance and an Arthurian reimagining, please, please, please go check out this 4-book series. It's complete, so you don't have to wait for another book to come out. All right, everybody, those are all of the books that I read in May. Are there any books that I have read that you haven't and now you're intrigued to go check them out? Have I read any books that maybe you didn't like? Vice versa. Leave me a strawberry emoji down below if you are still here in this video. Also, please make sure you check out the pinned comment where you can come and join my Patreon, where we are going to be reading Yellowface for June. You get to come and participate in a lot of shenanigans that we're going to be doing in June. So just come on over. Let's have a party. But I will see you all next time. Bye!